Imagine you're settling into a comfortable armchair late in the evening, that gentle hush of the night beginning to take hold of your surroundings. The lamp is casting a warm glow on a small table scattered with black and white photographs, and maybe a pair of vintage film magazines. One particular figure catches your eye. A handsome man with a slender build, hair combed meticulously, and an intensity in his gaze that seems to leap off the page. That man is Alan Ladd, a name once synonymous with some of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters during the 1940s and 1950s. If you look closely, you can see the evolution of his image, from a youthful up-and-comer struggling to break free from poverty and anonymity, to a confident leading man at the pinnacle of cinematic fame, and finally toward the latter stages of his career, a star wrestling with personal challenges that fame alone could never solve. Tonight I'd like to tell you his story in a way that draws you in from the very first line and keeps you enthralled until the closing credits. Because Alan Ladd's life wasn't merely a tale of Hollywood glitz. It was also a deeply personal journey marked by perseverance, heartbreak, triumph, and an unshakable resolve to prove himself against all odds. Picture it. The year is 1913, and in a place called Hot Springs, Arkansas, known more for its soothing thermal waters than for launching film legends, a tiny infant named Alan Walbridge Ladd is brought into this world. He could hardly have guessed the extraordinary path his future would take, nor the heartaches that would loom large in his life. From the start, it seems that fate decided to test him. When he was only 4 years old, his father passed away from a heart attack, robbing the family of both a paternal figure and financial stability. This tragedy set a tone for Alan's childhood, a life lived in poverty, often subject to transience and upheaval, compounded by the daily burden of never having quite enough to eat. Even a young child can sense the ache of insecurity, and that sensation sank into Alan's bones early on. Through all this, however, there remained a faint but persistent glimmer of hope, a dream that would carry him far beyond the dusty roads of Arkansas. Move forward a few years and you'll see Alan no longer a tiny boy in Hot Springs, but a scrappy kid in California, trying to outrun the ghost of poverty that followed his family across state lines. His mother, an English woman who struggled in the wake of her husband's death, remarried. With his new stepfather, young Alan found himself in a part of California that glittered with a tantalizing sense of possibility: Hollywood. Yet while the famed movie capital was just around the corner, the lad and his family started out in a transient camp in Pasadena, living day to day, uncertain about what tomorrow might bring. The glitz of the silver screen felt far removed from their reality. Imagine the smell of dust, the cramped living conditions, the gnawing worry over the next meal. Alan recalled later how they survived on little more than potato soup for what felt like weeks on end, each bowl a reminder of an empty bank account. Yet even with so little, he held tight to an inner spark, the notion that maybe, just maybe, he could find his footing in this world by standing before a camera. Growing up, Alan faced more than just financial struggles. Even in childhood, he was teased for his small stature. In schoolyards and sports fields, bullies would taunt him, ridiculing him for his lack of height. But these hardships helped mold him into a resilient young man who discovered that physical size doesn't necessarily dictate personal strength or resolve. Around the age of 14, Alan found part-time work lifting heavy produce crates. The physical labor helped him develop a sturdy constitution, and it wasn't long before he ventured into athletics. Like so many teenagers, he sought out an activity that might bring him acceptance and confidence. Swimming and diving became his passions, so much so that he began training for the 1932 Olympic Games, a dream that, unfortunately, dissolved when injury intervened. But the seed had already been planted in Alan's mind that discipline, perseverance, and a refusal to surrender could open doors that once seemed completely shut. As he grew older, Alan discovered another arena where he felt the comfortable spotlight of his own potential, the theater stage. A student at North Hollywood High School, he first encountered the enchantment of drama through the school's dramatic society. Even in small productions, the applause stirred something within him. He felt a new sense of belonging. The stage, it turned out, was the one place where he didn't feel overshadowed by taller peers, where his voice could resonate across the stage as strongly as anyone's. Perhaps he couldn't tower in physical height, but he could command attention in other ways, mesmerizing audiences with a quiet intensity that would soon become his trademark. After high school, Alan was determined to transform that spark of theatrical enthusiasm into a true career. Of course, the transition to professional acting was far from smooth. Some nights he would collapse onto a makeshift bed after a day of menial jobs, uncertain if he'd ever be cast in a single speaking role. At various points he worked as a lifeguard, patrolled swimming areas in case of emergencies, and even opened a tiny hamburger stand, affectionately called Tiny's Patio, a nod to a childhood nickname. None of these ventures provided the breakthrough he wanted, but each paid the bills for a little while. Despite the monotony, these experiences also sharpened his resourcefulness. He learned that to survive in a place like Hollywood, where thousands of dreamers arrived each day only to return home with their hopes dashed, you had to be ready to do whatever it took. Yet the film industry intrigued him so powerfully that mere day jobs could never fully extinguish his ambitions. Through the help of a family friend, Alan managed to enroll in an acting school affiliated with Universal Pictures. He would do grunt work at Warner Brothers as a carpenter or a grip, picking up any minor gig that would expose him to the inner workings of a movie set. It wasn't glamorous, but it brought him into contact with directors, producers, actors, and the intangible hum of creativity that buzzed through a film studio. At the same time, he landed small parts in local theater productions and little by little advanced to reading lines on radio programs like Lux Radio Theater. The pace was slow, but Alan was tenacious, compelled by a belief that the camera would eventually find him. Early roles were fleeting. In some, he was practically a blur in the background, an extra whose face the audience wouldn't even notice. In others, like Tom Brown of Culver, Island of Lost Souls, or Pigskin Parade, he might have a single line, quickly forgotten. But each day in front of the camera was a lesson. He worked intensely to polish not just his acting skills, but also his voice, conscious that his fair complexion and smaller frame might not fit the era's template of rugged movie star masculinity. He discovered that he had a unique presence, quieter, more reserved, compelling in its restraint. Producers and casting directors, however, weren't always convinced. Some frowned at his blonde hair, fair skin, and relatively modest height. They wanted towering, brawny heroes. Alan, determined to stand out, leaned into subtlety, perfecting an acting style that radiated calm confidence. He was, in effect, the anti-loud leading man, and there was something magnetic about that contrast. Then came the gradual shift. A better agent, the Sue Carroll Agency, took him on. The difference was almost immediate. He snagged slightly more noticeable parts in films like Rulers of the Sea, Blame It on Love, Those Were the Days, and Meet the Misses. Around 1941, Alan scored a small but notable role as a newspaper reporter in Citizen Kane, an uncredited performance, yet in a movie that would go on to be hailed as one of the greatest achievements in cinematic history. Even if audiences didn't know his name, being part of Orson Welles' masterpiece gave him a measure of confidence. It whispered that maybe, just maybe, he belonged among the greats. Yet the real turning point arrived in 1942 when Allen appeared in Joan of Paris, holding his own alongside Thomas Mitchell. Suddenly, critics and audiences took note of the actor who could project tension with a mere flick of his expression. That same year, something else would shape his destiny. He married his agent, Sue Carroll. The match would prove transformative both personally and professionally. Sue, an ex-actress with an almost relentless devotion to promoting Allen, saw a star in him. She leveraged her connections to secure a contract for him with Paramount, and from there, his career began its sharp upward ascent. It didn't hurt that around this time, Allen was cast alongside the similarly petite but undeniably charismatic Veronica Lake. The film was This Gun for Hire, and it was electric. Audiences responded enthusiastically to the chemistry that crackled between him and Veronica. They were a compelling visual pair, both blonde, both smaller than the typical Hollywood leading man and leading lady, and there was a dreamy, almost noir-like mystique to their on-screen interactions. The film's success essentially cemented Allen's place in the industry. Instead of playing incidental roles, he was suddenly sought after for significant projects. He and Veronica made multiple movies together, including The Glass Key and The Blue Dahlia, each feeding into the public's appetite for this striking duo with understated performances and a brooding film noir magnetism. Of course, life had a way of interrupting even the most promising careers. In 1943, the United States was fully embroiled in World War II, and Allen, like so many of his generation, answered the call. He joined the Army Air Forces. But destiny or ill health intervened again. He was discharged after roughly a year due to digestive issues, returning to Hollywood not with stories of triumph on the battlefield, but with the knowledge that war was no place for a fragile constitution. Still, the interruption did not derail his forward momentum. By the mid-1940s, Allen was consistently landing prominent roles, and audiences were flocking to see him. In 1946 alone, he headlined a remarkable trio of hits. 2 years before The Masked, the spy thriller OSS, and once again a film noir with Veronica Lake, The Blue Dahlia. Eager to maximize his popularity, Allen took a leap, forming his own production company, Mayfair Productions, in 1947. It was a bold move for an actor who had once struggled to get even a meager line in a B picture, and it signaled a shift in how he viewed his career. Rather than remain a cog in the studio system's machinery, he sought some level of control over his creative and professional destiny. Around the same period, he began a syndicated radio series called Box 13. In this show, he took on the persona of Dan Holliday, a newspaperman turned mystery novelist, weaving weekly tales of intrigue for a mass radio audience. The success of Box 13 further solidified Allen's brand. Thoughtful, controlled, and ever so slightly mysterious. Meanwhile, his films continued to do well at the box office, and he gained recognition as one of the top 10 money earners for multiple years. Then came 1953, and the project that would define Allen's screen legacy, Shane. Directed by George Stevens, this Western centered on a gunfighter's efforts to protect a family of settlers from a ruthless land baron. Though the story was in some ways familiar to the genre, Allen's performance as Shane was anything but typical. He played the gunslinger as a man of few words and subtle actions, letting quiet glances and carefully measured pauses reveal his character's depth. The image of Shane riding away into the distance as a young boy calls after him, "Shane, come back," remains one of the most iconic endings in film history, emblematic of the lonely, morally complex figure who sacrifices personal desires for the greater good. Strikingly, even with the film's massive impact, Allen did not receive an Academy Award nomination. In those days, the Academy sometimes overlooked actors whose performances were more understated. But critics and audiences alike recognized that Shane was among the finest Western performances ever put on film, and the role would endure as a highlight in the tapestry of Hollywood's golden age. Despite the monumental success of Shane, Allen's career trajectory in the aftermath wasn't entirely smooth. Creative differences arose with Paramount largely over financial matters. Rather than remain under contract to a studio he felt was undervaluing him, he opted to strike out on his own once more. He formed Jaguar Productions, continuing his collaboration with Sue Carroll, who was indispensable as both spouse and agent. He also inked a deal for 3 pictures with Warwick Films, contingent on having his personal screenwriter co-write the scripts. This arrangement gave him a measure of control, but it also meant stepping away from the comfortable, lavish resources that Paramount could provide. He traveled to England to shoot Paratrooper, also known as the Red Beret, Hell Below Zero, and The Black Knight. Though none of these achieved the towering success of Shane, they demonstrated Allen's determination to remain an active and relevant force, even if it meant venturing beyond Hollywood's borders. While he still found roles in high-profile productions, such as Boy on a Dolphin, starring alongside the radiant Sophia Loren in her English-language debut, and the Korean War drama. All the Young Men with Sidney Poitier. Other titles fell flat with critics and audiences. The McConnell Story, 1955, and The Proud Rebel, 1958, had their admirers, but they didn't deliver the kind of box office or critical acclaim that once seemed effortless for him. Bit by bit, Allen began to sense the subtle shift in public interest. Hollywood was changing, with a new generation of stars poised to steal the spotlight. Audiences no longer gravitated exclusively to the strong, silent types who dominated the 1940s. The rise of television further fragmented the market, diminishing the monolithic power once held by film studios. At the same time, Allen's personal life took on increasingly troubling dimensions. That early thread of hardship in his life never quite vanished, evolving instead into battles with depression, health issues, and a reliance on alcohol and sedatives. The charm of his outward demeanor masked a deep well of sadness. Part of this stemmed from family tragedies, witnessing his father's death at such a young age, accidentally burning down his home when he was just 5, coping with extreme poverty, and later his stepfather's passing, all shaped him in painful ways. Even as his star rose, he supported his mother, who struggled with alcoholism, a vicious cycle that eventually led to her taking her own life. The weight of these experiences, combined with the relentless demands of a public career, often felt crushing. At times, Allen found the mental burdens almost too heavy to bear. In 1955, during the filming of the McConnell Story, Allen had an affair with his co-star, June Allison. Though brief, this episode reflected his emotional instability and further fanned the flames of personal turmoil that he'd carried since childhood. Publicly, he tried to present a tranquil front with his wife, Sue, and their children, but privately, he was spiraling. The era's social norms were such that many Hollywood stars hid their emotional and physical wounds behind carefully engineered press releases. While the tabloid press might have speculated, the studios had a vested interest in preserving the illusion of the star's perfect life. By the early 1960s, the toll of sleepless nights, repeated injuries, and anxiety began mounting. Allen had trouble sustaining the same level of focus that once came naturally to him. He was using barbiturates and alcohol to cope, leading to episodes that verged on self-harm. A harrowing moment came in November of 1962 when he shot himself. Rumors swirled that it was no accident, but in the interest of preserving reputations and ongoing projects, a public spin was quickly arranged. The official story was that the incident was nothing more than a mishap. Still, Allen soldiered on professionally, appearing in his final film, The Carpetbaggers, in 1964. Despite the behind-the-scenes struggles, he managed to deliver a compelling performance, reminding everyone of the talent he still possessed. Yet fate, unrelenting as ever, intervened once more. On January 29, 1964, Allen Ladd was found dead in Palm Springs, California, from an overdose of alcohol and sedatives. He was just 50 years old. The official ruling declared it accidental, though many believed, and perhaps still believe, that it was a deliberate act by a man weighed down by too many sorrows. In a blink, Hollywood lost one of its brightest stars from the golden era. It's easy to think back on Allen Ladd's life and feel overwhelmed by the dark edges of his story. Poverty, parental deaths, mental health battles, physical ailments, heartbreak. But it's equally important to remember what he contributed. For over a decade, he stood near or at the very top of the box office rankings, delivering performances that left a mark on film history. His portrayal of Shane in particular remains a high watermark of Western cinema. The subtlety that some critics once labeled as too restrained ultimately became his signature. In a film landscape filled with larger-than-life chest-thumping heroes, Allen's quiet strength was a welcome antidote, and audiences responded powerfully to that authenticity. Though he never received an Oscar nomination, the significance of his accomplishments can't be measured by award tallies alone. In 1953, Photoplay named him the most popular male star, and the following year he received a Golden Globe as the World Film Favorite. These nods reflected the deep affection audiences had for him. He built an on-screen persona that was inimitable, low-key, reflective, and earnest. Even if critics quibbled over whether he deserved serious recognition, the typical moviegoer saw something relatable in his unassuming demeanor. He broke the mold of the towering, brash Hollywood leading man. For the boy teased for being too short, for the aspiring star deemed too blonde and fair, each success echoed with an air of sweet vindication. Looking back, Allen's story is a collage of contrasts. On the one hand, he triumphed over adversity, battling against a system and a society that seemed stacked against him from day one. He earned success, wealth, and a place among the luminaries of his craft. On the other hand, he struggled beneath it all, conflicted by personal losses and emotional wounds that never fully healed. It's a potent reminder that fame, for all its external shimmer, offers no guarantee of inner peace. The hardships one endures in early life don't simply vanish with the bright lights of the marquee. If anything, the intensity of show business can magnify them, forcing stars like Allen to confront their demons on a public stage. Yet for classic film enthusiasts and anyone who appreciates a measured, poignant performance, Allen Ladd's body of work stands as a testament to what it means to pursue a dream with unwavering devotion. The memory of that slender man with the quiet gaze, the man who could express deep wells of feeling in a mere tilt of his head, continues to resonate through film noir screenings and Western retrospectives. Even decades after his passing, new generations discover Shane and sense the undiminished power of that final ride into the sunset. They might then dig deeper, unearthing the Blue Dahlia, This Gun for Hire, and The Glass Key, discovering that the same actor who was overshadowed by the big personalities of his time could bring an understated brilliance that still captivates viewers today. When we think of an iconic film star, we often picture towering figures or enormous personalities that fill every inch of the screen with bombast. Alan Ladd proved that the opposite approach could be equally riveting. That's part of his legacy. The demonstration that subtlety, restraint, and vulnerability can be just as effective, perhaps even more so, in drawing an audience close. His life reminds us that no matter how humble one's beginnings, there's a path to greatness if one harnesses determination, resilience, and a willingness to weather life's harshest storms. If Alan's story has a moral, maybe it's that you can climb farther than you ever imagined, but you must also tend to your inner battles. Neglecting them can create a chasm that no amount of box office success can fill. In the grand timeline of Hollywood, Alan Ladd's star shone brightly yet briefly, a compressed burst of light that played out against personal tragedies. Still, we recall him vividly because in many ways, he personified the dream that Hollywood sold to a whole generation of moviegoers. The possibility that any individual, no matter how disadvantaged, could rise to stardom through sheer talent and perseverance. His story is thus both inspiring and cautionary. It shows us the heights one might reach and the perils that might accompany them. If you found yourself captivated by his journey, if it stirred something in you, whether it's nostalgia, admiration, or even curiosity, take a moment to show your support. Hit that like button so we know you enjoyed this deeper dive. Share a comment to let us know your favorite Alan Ladd role, or perhaps to talk about how his quiet style of acting resonates with you more than the flashier stars. And if you want more stories from the golden age of cinema, or deeper explorations into the lives of screen legends whose personal narratives might surprise you, consider subscribing. Sharing this video with friends and family is also a wonderful way to ensure that Alan Ladd's legacy endures for newer generations who may have never heard of him. Let's keep the memory of this remarkable actor shining, just as the final scene in Shane continues to illuminate the cinematic landscape so many decades later. Your support helps preserve the stories of stars like Alan Ladd, ensuring their contributions to film history will never be forgotten.